Well, French MPs will begin debating a bill to ban bullfighting this Thursday in Parliament. It is unlikely to pass, but it's still making headlines in the French papers. Our press reviewer, Diptyque Laurent, is here now to take us through it.
Well, Erin, for the first time, French MPs will begin debating this bill that's aiming to ban la corrida, the famous or rather infamous bullfighting tradition that's very popular in the south of France. That bill has been brought forward by the far left coalition. The MPs spearheading the bill will come down to the parliamentary arena to defend it. That's what Le Figaro says in this story here on its front page. But it also notes that already over more than 500 amendments have been requested against the bill. The Conservative Daily is firmly opposed to banning bullfighting, saying that at a time when the French countryside is becoming more and more empty and the cities are becoming more and more populated, is this really the time to erase or rather criminalize bullfighting that has a strong regional identity in France? Indeed, it's something that the British daily, The Telegraph, is looking at on in its edition today. Here, it talks about how bullfighting, like Scottish independence and fox hunting in Britain, never quite goes away in France. The Telegraph explains that bullfighting was actually imported from Spain into France in the 19th century, and it's heavily regulated in France, which means that not every city can conduct bullfights. In fact, they have to prove that they have a strong bullfighting tradition in order to conduct bullfights. It explains, the Telegraph says, why some cities like Nîmes are allowed to have bullfights, but the nearby city of Montpellier cannot. In any case, the government is vehemently opposed to the bill, which means it is unlikely to pass, but it is generating headlines nonetheless, Erin.
All right, Dipty, we're going to move on to China now, where you found an interesting piece about the repercussions of the government's investment in countries around the world. Yeah,
it's part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a lending project or an investment project in which the Chinese government builds infrastructure or invests in infrastructure in debt-strapped countries like Pakistan or developing countries like Nigeria. But the Wall Street Journal today explains in this feature article here that it does also have some negative repercussions on China. They speak, for instance, of gunmen in Nigeria who abducted 4 Chinese workers back in June at a mine, or another attack on a Chinese-funded business in Nigeria in which 1 employee was killed, to the point where the consulate there has even advised Chinese workers to hire private security. But it's not just Nigeria. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, Chinese business groups have reported an uptick in armed robberies and kidnappings. As the Wall Street Journal explains, with China's growing global influence across these countries comes the consequences of that projecting power, local resentment often because the Chinese workers who are there are far more wealthier than the locals, but also political instability and violence. It's well worth a read if you've got some time in the Wall Street Journal.
All right, Dipty, we're going to turn to a bit of World Cup news now. The German side this time is making front pages around the world today.
That's right. The Germans certainly stunned by their defeat against Japan, whose 2 substitutes scored those winning goals in that match yesterday. Another day, another World Cup upset. That's what Japan Today, a paper from Japan, says on its website, leading with that story. It's also the focus of some of the cartoonists today as well, Erin. This is from a Qatari cartoonist. His name is Saad Al-Muhanandi. He sees the German machine as having been disabled by the Japanese computer. You also have this one, a little bit more of a violent cartoon from a Lebanese cartoonist, Bleibel. And in this cartoon you see here, Hassan Bleibel sees the German eagle as being strangled by the red circle of the Japanese flag, the football there. But the Germans are also making headlines for their courageous protests that they led before that match in defiance of FIFA's ban on wearing anti-discrimination armbands. The German team putting their hands over their mouths during the national anthems, silence of the men. That's what the Berliner Morgenpost says. The Hamburger Morgenpost says on its front page. Meanwhile, you have Metro, the British daily, that calls it the armband stand on its front page. And you'll note that Metro's logo also emboldened with the colors of the rainbow, Erin.
Changing gears now, Dipti, millions of Americans today are celebrating Thanksgiving. And there is one tradition that an unlikely pair continue this year for the 7th straight year.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful story, Erin. It's what People magazine is looking at today. It started out 7 years ago when an Arizona grandma, Wanda Dench, accidentally texted Jamal Hinton thinking it was a number of her grandson, and she wanted to know if her grandson was coming to Thanksgiving. As it turned out, Hinton asked Dench if he could join her Thanksgiving festivities anyway, and she said yes. And the odd couple have spent every Thanksgiving together for the past 7 years. Unsurprisingly, they've made headlines. They've also appeared on talk shows. People magazine tells us that they don't just meet up for Thanksgiving. They have dinner a couple of times a year. Jamal turned up on Wanda's doorstep with a care package when she lost her husband to COVID. He even took her to get her first tattoo. Anyway, their story is such that, of course, Netflix is also now planning a holiday film around their very unlikely encounter. It had to happen. Netflix had to jump on the bandwagon, Erin.
It's been years, but that story is still no less touching. Proof that a little bit of kindness, especially with people you don't necessarily know, can go a long way. Well, we'll continue on the positive stories then. Dipti, you're taking us to a heartwarming picture of the oldest cat in the world that's been named by the Guinness Book of World Records. Yeah,
I know you love cats, Erin, so this is why I picked this story. I also love cats, so it works out well. The Times is talking about the oldest cat in the world who takes a title by a whisker, ha ha ha. Her name is Flossie. She's deaf, mostly blind, pretty grumpy, but the former stray cat has outlived 2 owners, and now at the age of nearly 27 years old, she's actually the same age as her current owner. She's been designated the world's oldest cat by the Guinness World Records. The Times of London tells us that in human years, she's about 120 years old, which is pretty much on par with the oldest person ever recorded, a French woman who lived to the age of 122.
And there you go. Hope for all of us cat owners out there that they could maybe accompany all of us to the end of our lives. Dipti Laurel, thank you very much.